The coronavirus cases around the world are accelerating. There are now 3 new countries which have epidemics that didn't have epidemics last week. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Martinson. It's February 21st, 2020. I'm here with your coronavirus update, or COVID-19, as the WHO would have us call it. The title of today's presentation is Accelerating. All right, let's move on to the numbers. Of course, China, who knows what's going on here. I think they've underreported these cases very, very much, and they're bouncing around in new cases and whatnot because of how they're recording them and what they're terming a coronavirus case, whether they're using clinical and or they're using PCR tests to verify. Whatever the case, we still have 12,000 people that are noted as being in serious or critical condition. The recovered is now beyond the serious and critical. It's been there for a couple days, so they're saying they're past the corner on that. But we will see. I think they've turned the corner because of some very, very difficult containment measures that they've had to put their population under. All right, moving on. South Korea. Oh, my gosh, 93 new cases. They are now in a full-blown epidemic and a new death recording in South Korea, tragically. Japan, 14 more cases, is now over the 100 mark itself, so it's pretty much in a epidemic at this point. Singapore doing a fantastic job all the way around in terms of how they are tracing their contacts and how they're managing this and how they're recording and reporting on all of this. Just doing a fantastic job. No new cases in Hong Kong. That's surprising. All things considered, 12 more in the United States. But I got to talk about the United States in just a second because of this number right here. 6 total recovered. Something isn't right in these numbers, and I don't believe the numbers are correct elsewhere in a couple of these countries. But Italy, with a big surprise, plus 15, and lots to talk about there. We'll get there soon. And Iran, I believe, is also in the midst of an epidemic based on, I think these numbers are very low. So we'll just have to go forward with that. But the United States, let's talk about that very quickly. This is from the update I did on February 13th. That's a full week ago. Then the United States was saying, hey, we only got 15 coronavirus cases and 3 have recovered. So that leaves 12 who haven't recovered from here to here. As of yesterday, the United States was still reporting 15, today reporting 27, but that's because of all the patients that got moved from the Diamond Princess and came to the United States. But let's look out here. 6 total recovered. So if we had 3 total recovered a week ago, and now we've only got 6, well, that leaves 12 patients unaccounted for that are neither in serious or critical condition, but have been in the hospital for at least a week and can't be recorded as recovered. Something is not right with these numbers. I'm pretty sure we're not getting the total picture. So who knows why that's the case, but we're just not getting very good or timely information out of the U.S. at this point. In Italy, these 10 new cases, 10 towns, 30,000 people have been placed in precautionary voluntary quarantine. Voluntary quarantine. I guess, just honor system. Make sure you stay in home. Schools, workplaces, municipal, private offices, coffee shops, public places, all closed down in the affected towns until at least Sunday. Well, that's just tomorrow. I'll bet you anything Sunday becomes Monday, becomes next week, becomes next month. We'll have to see how this goes. That included 5 health workers and 3 patients in the Codogno Hospital. Codogno. I bet that's pronounced Codogno Hospital, right? 5 health workers, 3 patients. So we have a super spreader there. Did a fantastic job of spreading this all around, just like that one that we have in that woman in South Korea. And a couple of these ages right here in critical condition. So that's 78, 67 years old. Again, very much in the age bracket where this hits you hard, really hard. And 2 new cases in Australia, but both of these are women who'd been evacuated from the Diamond Princess cruise ship. 1 new case in Singapore and first case in Lebanon. So that's a first case. This is a woman who traveled there from Iran. Okay. And we've got 10 new cases in Japan, of which 3 in Tokyo. That death in South Korea was a 54-year-old woman. We've got a first case in Israel, which notably here, a passenger of the Diamond Princess cruise ship who was found to have the virus only after returning to Israel. And there are 2 new deaths, 13 new cases in Iran. So this is very concerning. So let's go on to Iran, just to start there real quick. The cases have been reported in Rasht, if I'm pronouncing that right, and in Qom, and in Tehran. So you can see they're all sort of clustered right around here. very populated areas. So that's going to be something, if based on the numbers that we're seeing right now, very poor information out of Iran, but it looks like Iran has a full-blown epidemic at this point in time, and we're going to be seeing those numbers really climb. So this, at least if this is true, is probably one of the more pronounced epidemic cases that we're seeing, particularly in a non-Asian population. So that's worth noting here. Spreading very rapidly through Iran. Iran's health ministry today said, based on existing reports, the spread of coronavirus started in Qom and has now reached several cities, including Tehran. I guess we have to conclude Babal, Arak, Isfahan, Rasht, other cities. Possible it's all over the place. And as well, we have the first coronavirus case confirmed in Lebanon after a woman arriving from Iran was found to be positive. Also, 2 other suspected cases. So whatever's going on in Iran, it's been very, very virulent and has passed and progressed easily and rapidly from, even in this case, out to Lebanon. Worst place of all I can imagine for an outbreak would be in prisons. So we had 2 big pieces of news today from China. The first, the head of Wuhan Women's Prison has been fired for failing to fulfill his duties because there are now 230 confirmed cases of coronavirus at the prison. And another outbreak was reported at a prison in Zhejiang province, 34 cases confirmed. And that's just a horrifying situation. So it could obviously spread very quickly through prisons, through military barracks, through schools, any other large gatherings. But South Korea is the real surprise here. Remember, we're looking here now at a log chart. So anytime you see a straight line, something is growing exponentially. It had flattened out for a while. But oh my gosh, look at this hockey stick it just took right here. And it really looks like South Korea is about to just have a full-blown epidemic outbreak of this. And South Korea is doing what it can. They have 100 new cases of coronavirus so far today. 98 out of 156 cases, this was earlier today, that was very early this morning, were associated with the church in Daegu. So, oh my gosh, whatever they were doing there involved a lot of close contact. So that's a big part of the outbreak right there. But once you have that many cases, as well as you know, because of the asymptomatic carriers and things like that, it's going to be very, very hard to contain that and trace all of those contacts. I would say anytime you're over 50 cases, it gets hard. Once you're over 100 cases, you're pretty much just now in management rather than containment at that point. Maybe. We'll see. South Korea, Daegu, the bus lines have stopped. That's what this sign reads. They've just stopped the buses and said, nope, we're not doing buses anymore. So, of course, the very next thing you see is people stockpiling food. Just a picture from a store here showing people gathering cases of food because they are fearing the sort of lockdowns that they know and see in China. And there are a lot of stories leaking out of China now that people are starving and getting very, very hungry and that there's not enough food. And even when they are allowed out of their houses, they can't go and find food and things like that. Plenty of cases, which makes sense. Japan, now over 100 cases itself, as we mentioned before. And Tokyo is now canceling major indoor events for the next 3 weeks due to coronavirus. And why 3 weeks? We don't know. Maybe it'll turn into 5 weeks, or maybe they'll disband it earlier. We don't know. But the Olympics are starting to look suspect, and that would just be an enormous blow. Let's turn to Italy real quick. So Italy's new case this morning reported a 39-year-old man seriously ill, suffering from respiratory failure. That's kind of an early young age there to be reporting something like that. An update later said that all 6 of the new coronavirus cases in Italy are in serious condition. So almost all of these cases from Codogno here first started with a 38-year-old man originally from here, residing here, admitted to the hospital in intensive care. And there was a 29-year-old researcher who had been declared substantially cured, whatever that means. But then the pregnant wife of the 38-year-old and his sports partner also hospitalized. And then there were 3 other positive people who went to the hospital with important pneumonia pictures. And these are 3 elderly people who frequent the same bar as a 38-year-old sports partner. So sports partner, whatever that means in this context. And also those 5 health workers from the hospital and 3 patients also positive. So super spreader. Went in and got his sports partner, who then gave it to some elderly people in the same bar, also spread it to some health workers and patients. So this thing is really quite an aggressive, easy spreader. Italy now has quarantines. Again, I don't know what this really means, but 9 towns are under quarantine now, all pretty much right in the same region, all clustered around this original place where it came from, but where that patient 0 is there. But I think this is more of a voluntary quarantine, but who knows how long it takes before that progresses into an actual quarantine. As well, let's continue with the plague ship U.S. edition. This is really, really maddening. 14 Americans infected with coronavirus on a cruise ship were flown back to the U.S. against CDC advice, so I don't know who overruled the CDC, on a plane filled with people who were virus-free and not told about the sick passengers. So that is just another bureaucratic nightmare, some sort of a mess up on that one. I would be so upset if I had managed to survive the Princess Disaster ship, I'm Disaster Princess, without getting sick, only to be flown back on a plane with 14 other sick people. That's really not good. This doesn't really have to do with the plague ship, but this is just an interesting tidbit from the U.S. Only 3 states can now test for coronavirus because of flawed kits. So California, Nebraska, Illinois, only 3 U.S. states that can currently test for coronavirus because the CDC said last week some of the testing kits sent to the U.S. states at least 30 countries produced inconclusive results due to a flawed component. Okay, and then they're going to send out replacement materials to make the kits work. But that doesn't give a lot of confidence that we're actually seeing the proper cases get tested and found. This is my real uh-oh of the day. This came out on Reuters earlier this morning, about 3 in the morning. It says your coronavirus patient re-hospitalized in China's Chengdu after testing positive again. Remember we were talking about those secondary infections and the possibility maybe of this thing being mutated. We don't know. Let's just see what we got here. A coronavirus patient initially discharged following recovery in southwestern Sichuan province's Chengdu City has been readmitted after testing positive again during a quarantine period at home. Similar cases have been reported in other regions, the center said in a statement. If a similar case is people who have been initially discharged following recovery and then readmitting after testing positive. Now, I don't know if they were they were just testing them again and found a positive test because this is people who have recovered but are still in that infectious stage that we talked about yesterday, or if this is somebody representing the hospital because they don't feel good, they test them and oh my gosh, they find out that they are now positive again. So many questions around that. So the questions are this: was this patient or these patients, I guess, exposed to a different serotype, that is a mutated form of the COVID-19 virus? Are they having an ADE reaction in this case? And so we don't know if that's really what's happening here. Or were they just prematurely declared recovered? They weren't actually recovered. They came back. They weren't feeling well. They still tested positive. Or are we already on the second go round of this whole thing because a critical mutation has occurred, and we're already in that stage of things? We don't know. Lots of questions, but this is concerning, and we really want to track the outcome of this case to see how that goes. All right. The CDC is preparing for the possibility coronavirus becomes a pandemic, and, maybe businesses and schools need to be closed. So I'm glad the CDC is preparing for that. Look what the CDC says down here. This is today, right? This is February 21st. Look what they're saying. We're not seeing community spread here in the United States yet, but it's possible, even likely that it may eventually happen. This Dr. Nancy Messonnier, I saw an interview with her this morning where she basically said that this thing is, she was asked, what is a coronavirus? She said, well, those are the things that give you colds. And this one can give you cold symptoms or maybe worse. Right? She was really downplaying it. This whole idea, we're not seeing community spread here in the United States yet. That's the official statement from Dr. Nancy Messonnier, the director of the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. The director of that. This is also the CDC. This is their current flow chart to identify and assess the novel coronavirus. Forget even that they're sending out bum kits. This is from their, I pulled this off their website just half hour ago. So this is current from the CDC website. Look at their flowchart. Identify. Step A, if in the past 14 days, since the first onset of symptoms, a history of either travel to China or close contact with a person known to have the illness, right? if you don't have either a history of travel to China or close contact with somebody known to have the illness, you're not going to get tested and you're not going to get identified, right? Which leads us to this. Well, you can't have any community level outbreaks if you only test people with direct China contacts, right? As I've learned, much to my chagrin, not Eddie Murphy. Of course, this is the character Roll Safe from the Hood documentary. So sorry about that misidentification, but I love this. I love this meme, and I'm going to use it here. If the CDC is saying we don't have community level outbreaks, but they're only identifying people, they're only testing people and assessing people if they've traveled to China or have close contact with somebody known to have the 2019 nCoV illness, then obviously you're not going to find any community level outbreaks. That's just, again, having trouble forming proper words here. And as well, sort of continuing on with that theme, though, we have this recovered but still infectious, which we talked about a little bit. We are now, this news is coming out. A Chinese coronavirus expert says some recovered patients could still be infectious. No surprise to us because we went over this chart yesterday, which shows that with all these common viruses here, there is a period during which you, after symptoms, which is in the red, symptomatic period, where you are still contagious in this purple period. Very common for that to be part of viruses. No reason to expect this wouldn't be part of this coronavirus. Economic supply chains. Let's turn to economics real quick. I think this is going to be the thing that's going to impact the most people. I understand why the CDC and other macro players are working very hard to sort of minimize as much as they can the economic and social impacts of all of this, because the supply chain disruptions, the economic disruptions could be quite large. So here's Fortune reporting what we reported last week, which is that 94% of the Fortune 1000 companies are seeing supply chain disruptions. So remember, we talked about those tier 1, tier 2 sort of companies out there. But a couple interesting new pieces in here, which was great to see. The pinch is already being felt. Amazon has been stockpiling Chinese-made goods. Under Armour warned of a $50 to $60 million potential shortfall in Q1. Multiple automakers have shut down factories in China. I think we also have some in Korea that have shut down. Nintendo expects inevitable production and shipment delays. A growing number of companies have issued earnings warnings related to the coronavirus. And it's not like SARS, because, when they said, SARS shut things down for a little while, it had an economic impact. That was in 2003. When you look at the SARS outbreak in 2003, China was 2% of the global GDP. Now they're 20%, not just 20% as in a fifth, but some ridiculously large proportion of manufacturing that's a lot higher than 20%. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 30%, maybe 33%. It's really big. Already feeling the impact, according to the study, are automobile and electronics industries, which face the largest first quarter earnings effects on earnings, and then come retail and financial services, followed by total services, and a heavy emphasis on disrupted tourism. So big macro things going on, huge, large economic impacts. Like, I don't even know how to get my head around this one, which is that corona supply chain headache spread as more than 1 in 2, 50% of all Asia to North Europe sailings are canceled. These are just canceled. So this is a whole sailing. This is a whole ship that might look like this, not leaving. 1 out of 2, not going anywhere. So the analysts here at Alphaliner counted 33 canceled sailings, meaning 46% of scheduled departures on the route have been dropped. And to put some context around this, capacity reductions are expected to reach about 700,000 TEUs. Each one of those is a TEU right there. Far more severe than the 340,000 TEU cut seen in the same post-Chinese New Year period last year. So there were already cuts because of the Chinese New Year, but this is now just exceeding that and doubling even what you would see as a response to China New Year. All right, moving on. There are also small economic impacts, and this is just what I grabbed in just a couple of seconds of looking. We've got everything from foreign artists delaying concerts to Korea. So, those are concerts that don't happen with some sort of economic impact. There's all these cancellations of these marketing conferences. This one was pretty big. This 4,000 people were expected to attend. That's not happening. There's an annual meeting in Singapore has been canceled. We've got PlayStation and Facebook canceled the GDC plans, their global development conference and or gaming development conference. I forget which one that is. The World Team Table Tennis Championships in doubt after Busan, the second largest city in Korea, reports coronavirus. We've got organizers of job fairs and other events in Japan are pulling the plug. Coronavirus cripples school bus companies. And so operators and drivers, this is in Korea, say that they've been left unpaid and they're threatening to quit. So this is happening all over the place, and there's too many of these to count. So we have both macro and microeconomic things going on. As a quick reminder, this thing is not the flu. It's not SARS. All right, for the conclusions today. Coronavirus cases are now exploding all over the globe. We now have epidemics in 3 more countries than last week. That would be Japan. That would be in Korea, South Korea. And that also includes Iran right now. So Iran, Japan, and South Korea. The secondary reinfections, if that's what they are. Again, we're going to have to hunt that down, but I'm just raising this as an early thing that made at least one eyebrow go way up on my forehead this morning. Really possibly very worrisome. If secondary reinfections are a thing, that changes the entire dynamic of this virus and what happens next. The chance that U.S., Canada, Australia are having essentially no new cases, just statistically improbable. When you look at how many students alone, let alone forget just Chinese visitors that come all over to the west coast of the United States, all over to Australia, going to Hawaii, places like that, coming to Canada, Vancouver. Forget the tourists, just the students alone who are returning from break and coming back to attend colleges. Tens of thousands of Chinese students coming, many of them flying straight out of the Wuhan region. The idea that none of them essentially came with the virus is it's just statistically improbable. The economic impacts, these are going to be absolutely massive. This is going to, nobody can really predict what's going to happen here because we have both a very complicated as well as a complex system of global just-in-time delivery chains. When you break a supply chain, not one, but many of them all at once, the impacts are just going to be absolutely massive. And these impacts are going to range from school bus companies going bust to mega corporations needing a year or more to resolve supply chain issues as they relocalize and relocate and resource things from other areas and or rebuild their supply chains. That's very difficult to do, particularly if one company maybe could do it, but if lots of companies are trying to do it at the same time, everything from precursors to intermediates, raw goods, finished goods, what a mess. And maybe we're going to discover that globalization wasn't such a hot idea after all. United States, 97% dependent on China for antibiotics and other such things like that. Big, staggering numbers. So if it means companies and countries sort of rethink this and relocalize a lot of very vital manufacturing and deglobalize a little bit, maybe that's a good outcome. But boy, in between here and there, it's going to be absolutely massive sorts of problems in between. All right, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi folks, Adam Taggart here. Chris Martinson and I are the co-founders of Peak Prosperity. If you want to get alerted whenever we release a new video from Chris, just click the red subscribe button right beneath the YouTube video player. Once you've done that, a little bell icon will appear right next to it. Click on that bell. It looks like this. And that's it. The next time we publish a video from Chris, you'll immediately receive a notification from YouTube. Thanks for watching our videos.